Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You're listening to Outsized Returns. I'm your host, Samuel Austin Taylor, Sam T, Sir Sam T on all the social media platforms. So today we have a fantastic guest who's going to detail the story about his startup, how his previous practice or current practice, if you will, is going to help a lot of different companies and individuals with a number of things that are extremely expensive if you listen to our last episode. So I interviewed Justin Moore, a former attorney in the private equity space. And my guest today, Tony Luna of Keeleg, is going to detail how AI can help solve a lot of people's law problems. And Tony, you can kind of correct me if I'm saying that right, because we want to allow the audience a way to save money on lawyer fees. That's my selfish reason for asking you to come on the podcast, but I'll let you kind of tell everybody about Keeleg. So Tony, welcome to Outsized Returns.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about you, your background, and how Keeleg got started as well.
Yeah, so a little bit about my background. So I'm a licensed attorney here in California. I have my own law practice, and I developed Keeleg in 2018. A little bit more about my background. So I graduated from the McGeorge School of Law, which is the law school of the University of the Pacific. The campus is in Sacramento. I graduated with honors, did a number of internships. While I was in law school, learned a lot of different things while I was in law school, working those internships. Started my practice as an attorney with a civil litigation firm out in Fresno, and had a really great experience. But I'm from the Bay Area, so after a little bit of time, moved back to the Bay Area, jumped around a couple other firms. And in 2014, started my own law practice focused on personal injury and workers' compensation matters, and have pretty much been an entrepreneur working for myself, doing investments ever since. So been going strong for about 6 years, been very, very lucky and fortunate to have made some right moves financially. And with Keeleg, we're looking at, doing something incredible to help as many people as possible.
Okay, awesome. So you probably aren't subscribed to Outsized Return yet, but if you could go to www.outsidesreturns.com, you can see our previous episodes. Mm-hmm. I interviewed one of my buddies prior to our conversation today, who was an attorney, and I said, hey man, tell everybody why attorneys cost $400 an hour. Because we can all do the math, and I think that Keeleg is going to help a lot of people with that problem. So we can get into the story about how AI helps assist people with litigation, but you can kind of take that wherever you want to. I think a lot of people want to know, I think, two things. One, how does Keeleg reduce the cost of attorney fees? And then two, how is artificial intelligence implemented in this company?
Sure. I'll start with the second part, how is artificial intelligence implemented, and then I'll talk about our solution and the pain points that Keeleg solves and aims to solve. So from an artificial intelligence standpoint, it's a broad brush term, frankly speaking. It's a buzzword, right, so to speak, in Silicon Valley.
Absolutely.
And it means a lot of things, but it also, at the heart of it, it's, I think, and how I define artificial intelligence is it's technology replicating human behavior, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there's different layers of artificial intelligence. There's, things that are basic to more advanced, and there's different applications and also different use cases. How we implement it, we're focused on using, and I apologize if I'm throwing out some keywords out there that might not come, and that might need to be defined, but we're implementing and using natural language processing, natural language understanding, natural language generation, as well as machine learning. Mm-hmm. And that sets the framework for our application. And the basis of the application is essentially for somebody to have a conversation, kind of like, if you think about Watson really paved the way for conversational AI through text form. And so we're looking at drawing that out and focus more so on the legal industry. So making a so to speak, a Watson version, but focused on legal issues.
So with that in mind, I mean, I've looked at the website. You can go to www.keeleg, KEELEG.com.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a car accident and I'm trying to price out how much it's going to cost for a defense attorney to represent me, is that the best use case, or is that an example of a use case for Keeleg?
So there's a couple. I'll unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
So car accident. Generally speaking, legal matters fall into either criminal or civil matters, right?
Oh, okay.
And so when you say car accident, what comes to mind is a civil matter.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking, car accidents are contingency based. So there isn't really a use case per se on defending yourself in a car accident. If you catch my drift, it's more
Right.
about pursuing an action for civil damages. And because those matters are contingency based, they would probably more fall into a situation where you would want to hire an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, not all attorneys take all civil cases either. And so there is I think when it comes to legal issues, what I've noticed is a lot of people try to solve their own legal issues first, right?
Right.
But when a matter is contingency based, the setup is they derive or they get the opportunity to hire an attorney basically for free until there is a recovery. And so in that sense, there's not really a cost to the potential client. Now, for us, what we are focused on, what Keeleg is focused on, are different type of use cases. So we're not focused on personal injury at the moment. We're not focused on criminal at the moment. What we're focused on are use cases that fall into immigration law. Right now, that's what we're offering. We're in the process of developing out a do-it-yourself solution for individuals who want to file personal bankruptcy. And we're also, at the same time, concurrently developing solutions for people who want to prepare their own wills and soon to be trusts. And just those three practice areas alone, it's very labor intensive. There's a lot of nuances between the jurisdictions. I'm not sure how familiar your audience is with how our legal system is set up. But
we know it's complicated.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And so I'll give you a good example here. So our immigration solutions, anyone in the United States can can go on our website and utilize the immigration solution currently on there, whether they're located in New York, Florida, California. It doesn't really matter what state they're in.
Okay.
But when we release our bankruptcy product, our product is going to be available first and only in California. So once we release it, if you're located in New York, unfortunately, we need to do a carve out, a customization of our bankruptcy product for somebody located in New York. And the reason being is immigration is a nationwide practice, whereas bankruptcy is state by state. Wills and trusts, for example, wills and trusts are also state by state practices. And even then there's a difference because bankruptcy petitions involve the federal court system, whereas the wills and trusts, general will and trust involves the state system, that state court system. So right there, it's a lot to comprehend that you have multiple court systems, multiple states, and then interpretation of law that might be different state by state or even court system to court system. So as you can imagine, it's very complicated, and kind of what you were discussing earlier, why are attorneys so expensive, is because it's so complicated.
Yeah, I mean, the attorneys, founded this great nation and then made it complicated so they could be the ones that, benefit the most from it.
I think there's some truth to that. But I would say that the legal industry is also, in a way, it's a big monopoly.
Yeah, for
Because the
sure.
state, yeah, and then the state bars control and dictate who can provide legal services, frankly.
Hmm.
And because that barrier uh,
It's a barrier
is,
to entry.
yeah, it's so high.
Yeah,
Joe Average can't come off the street. He could be, Goodwill Hunting. He could
you're right.
be so advanced in his knowledge of the law, but because he doesn't have the license and the degree, he's not able to provide help and assistance with an individual's legal matters, right? Because of that regulation.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny enough, just from the different businesses that I've been a part of or started or participated in, I've realized that, if you're starting a business, having a lawyer and an accountant are the two most important things that you can do in the beginning. Because
Right.
setting that proper foundation, whether you're doing business in California, Texas, New York, Wyoming, I mean, you ask 10 different attorneys, you possibly could get 10 different answers depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And your startup attorney that helps with, X, Y, and Z may be completely different in another state, or maybe honestly have a different opinion on how to go about those things in that same jurisdiction.
Mhm.
So, I think that that's why, attorneys, I say that a little tongue in cheek, but I think that that's why attorneys cost so much, because they know that, I'm going to do this wrong. And then, I'll just be candid with you. I asked you to set up a C corp and you set up an S corp. And I got to go back and redo some of those things. And so, working with attorneys is obviously super important, but also, there's no perfect switch, and you have to kind of stay up to date on some of those things as well, too.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. So there's definitely, so the way I describe legal problems, you have it's a range, right? On
Mm-hmm.
one end of the spectrum, you have very simple things, which is it legal to do A, B, or C?
Yep.
And then on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, you have way more complicated matters, which is, this is my situation, this is my goal, how do I accomplish my goal? And that requires definitely, on that end of the spectrum, requires a lot more hand-holding, finessing, built-in strategies based on that particular person's fact scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And what Keeleg does is we aim to solve kind of what's in the middle there. There are definitely situations where they are complex, but kind of like gravity, legal scenarios tend to occur similarly more often than not.
Mm-hmm.
And what we'll read in like case files are these one-off situations where there's a distinct or a novel issue that's being questioned because there's no straightforward answer.
Right.
But I think generally speaking, once and this ties into kind of machine learning. So there are definitely nodes or distinguishing characteristics for a person's fact scenario to achieve a certain goal. And if, these fact scenarios are triggered as in green light, red light, or black and white, or, 0 ones,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, is this fact present? Yes or no? Yes, it is. Okay, move on to the next question.
Right.
Is this fact present? Yes or no? Yes, it is. Move on to the next question. And similar to machine learning, where when the machine is trying to identify, is this a cat? Well, does the cat have a tail? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Does it have 2 eyes? Yes or no? Yes. And then so on and so forth.
Right.
Legal is, I think, if you remember, I'm sorry, theoretically in the same, operates the same way or
Yeah.
similarly.
Yep.
But there are definitely these situations where it's not bright line, it's not very clear. And in that situation, then it falls more on towards the side of the spectrum where, it does require legal assistance.
And that's, because, and we'll get into, maybe this is a good time to discuss the machine learning component, but because you're kind of in the middle spectrum where things, aren't, readily easily available, but they're not so complicated that you need a specialized or specialization type attorney to assist with whatever problem that you have. You can kind of solve a wide gap, charge a same dollar amount, and the technology kind of gets the same answers or same questions and gives the same answers and can drive down costs. Am I explaining that correctly?
So, let me kind of tell you a little bit more about my practice. So I've been servicing the community since 2014. I've had the luxury and opportunity to sit in, probably over 100 consultations, if not more, with potential clients. And one of the things that I've noticed among a lot of people who are looking to hire attorneys is that they, again, kind of going back to our initial topic, most people try to solve it themselves. And one of the things that I notice is they'll try to solve it themselves, they'll make an error, and then they end up having to hire an attorney to get them out of the hot water that they got themselves into.
Been there.
And had they hired an attorney in the first place, it would have actually cost them a lot less money, right?
Altogether, doing it the first time, you get what you pay for. It costs you significantly less the first time. You didn't know what you were doing, and now you have to go back. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so there's that use case, there's that scenario. And then there's also the scenario of, I'm going to hire an attorney because I want to avoid that issue in the first instance. And they look back at the work product that the attorney created for them, and they look at their billing, and then they go, I could have done that myself. I could have saved myself $2,000-$3,000. And so what our technology right now aims to solve is that particular situation. Because a lot of people, what they do is they find themselves needing to hire an attorney, having done something not unbeknownst to them, that their particular situation is one that is a complex one. And unbeknownst to them, that requires the knowledge and expertise of an attorney. And definitely there are the people who have scenarios that, there is no problem. Actually, you can do it yourself. There are no red flags. It's pretty straightforward. You can hire an attorney, but you can probably more than likely, save yourself that money. And so that's what I think ultimately the beautiful thing about artificial intelligence does, is because some of this knowledge, this probing of a user's fact scenario can be done through a technological spectrum, where and I would say it's very akin to when I used to do pro bono work. I used to do a lot of pro bono, sitting in pro bono or lawyer in the library type of thing, and I'll sit down with somebody who needs legal assistance for 10 minutes. And after that 10-minute conversation, I'll be able to know, okay, actually you can do this on your own, or no, you need the help of an attorney. So our technology functions in a similar manner, where when somebody has a consultation with our AI system, we call it Cato. When they have a conversation with Cato, Cato is able to detect red flags or potential problem areas. And as they go through that conversation, if they detect a problem area, our offshoot is, okay, you know what, let's stop right here. You're not really advisable. Your use case is not really the one that you should, prepare your own legal document. There's something in your fact situation, your background, that's going to pose a problem later on. And so rather than you finding out later on that you've made an error and then now having to pay a lot of money to dig yourself out of it, we're letting you know right now. And the beautiful thing about that consultation is it's free. And so what we're also building in is a system where, okay, once they're identified to have a scenario that they need to hire an attorney, then the question is, well, which one or who should they hire? And so we're also utilizing artificial intelligence to have that conversation with them, so we can point them in the right direction to find the best attorney in their area that can be reliable and help them out, and create some competition among attorneys for that work, because ultimately it's going to help drive down the cost for a consumer. And our main goal is to fill the justice gap with technology, because as we're talking about, attorneys are way expensive, and $400 an hour, and this obviously depends on which part of the country you're at. If you're making $10 an hour and the attorney's charging $400 an hour, that's somebody's 40-hour work week of wages just for
Right.
that 1 hour attorney time.
Yep.
And when, depending on the state of the economy, if it's a must have or need to have type of situation versus I can't pay my rent or I can't pay for food, I think a lot of people go, well, let me try it on my own again. And
Right.
we're back to that situation. Yeah.
Yeah. You bring up a great point, and I'm putting my investor hat on right now. It sounds like a massive problem that you're trying to solve. I don't know if you're fundraising right now or if this is still kind of in beta area, but it sounds definitely like a venture scalable business, as well as something that I think a lot of people can have a nice need and use for. Are you raising money currently right now? Where are you kind of in the startup process?
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. So we started I started this with a co-founder in 2018, the end of 2018.
Okay.
I actually sold my law practice with a former partner to start this, to focus solely on this and to kind of build a foundation, get the initial team going, build a framework. And ever since then, we've bootstrapped it. We put in over 6 figures of our personal capital
Yeah.
into the startup. And for example, my own attorney time, I've invested over 2,000 of my labor hours into this.
Wow.
So the opportunity cost for me is already in the millions. I charge 450 an hour for my legal services. So, but I believe in this so much, and my team believes in this so much that we stopped counting hours, so to speak. I know that amongst my team, we're well into the thousands of hours because this is a big problem to solve, and it's not easily solvable. And the reason that we're focused in on these 3 practice areas is, frankly, we need more resources because it takes so much time to develop out solutions for use cases. And when you're trying to do it on a wide spectrum and in complex areas of law, such as immigration, with very little room, if at all, no room for error, it becomes quite the challenge, so to speak. So to answer your question, we're not currently raising outside capital, but we are looking to raise outside capital probably Q3. And we're looking at either doing a seed round. We're also investigating using a couple of these crowdfunding equity sites such as Start Engine or WeFunder.
Okay.
I really like those business models too, because we're able to not only tell our story and get it out to a wider spectrum of people, but then we're also able to give kind of our goal is to fill the justice gap, but then from a financial standpoint, even give individual investors the opportunity to get into an investment early on instead of waiting for the public markets. And so if somebody really believes in what we're doing and wants to support us in our mission to make legal more available utilizing such technologies like artificial intelligence, but maybe they don't have a huge bankroll in the 6 figures or in the 7 figures, and maybe they have $1,000 or $2,000, but they still want to support us. We're looking at maybe doing a reg CF round to
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm familiar with the crowdfunding rounds, and I think that during this decade we'll see a lot more people or a lot more businesses kind of go that route as well too, just because as a kind of crowdfunder or equity funder, I can participate and back some of the businesses that I believe in, like yours, whether I have, $1,000 or $100, you can kind of scale and reach more people that way as well too. So I like that you're doing that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that the Jobs Act was a tremendous change, a great change for capital, for entrepreneurship, and for investors. And kind of what we were talking about offline. I actually started my entrepreneurship world as an investor.
Okay.
And during the Great Recession, my wife and I were lucky to locate some properties that we invested early on in. And because there was some built-in equity on those properties that we invested in, gave me the confidence to start my own law practice.
There you go.
2014, and then so on and so forth. So I'm highly I'm a big believer in supporting entrepreneurship, supporting other people's work missions,
Mm-hmm.
because frankly speaking, we can't tackle and solve every problem out there in the world.
Right. Nope.
But
Absolutely.
if you believe in a particular mission to be solved, and you have a day-to-day operation, whether it's a job or a business, but you want to be supportive to other missions, I think that investment capital is definitely a way to exercise your vote, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, being an accredited investor, you know, used to be a barrier to entry to get investments or get access to investments so you can get outsized returns. No pun intended.
Mhm.
Maybe we could debate that as well too. But, you know, a lot of times, the rich get richer, and that manifests itself in other problematic areas as well. And so, like you said, the Jobs Act kind of broke that framework to allow people to invest in this technology enabled startup that has the ability to go from $1 million fundraise right now to hopefully an IPO scalable company 5 maybe 10 years down the line. I know
Absolutely.
a lot of startups, most startups fail. People should know that as well too.
Mhm.
But if I can go and mortgage my house in Las Vegas, I should be able to give Tony Luna at Keeleg, $1,000, to help his technology startup.
Absolutely, and I think
Yeah,
it also helps spread around the risk. Um,
absolutely.
I'm not sure, most attorneys are pretty risk averse. I
Hmm.
consider myself more of the exception in that realm. But I'm not sure a lot of people would be willing to invest, 6 figures of their own personal capital on a tech startup when the failure rate is so high.
Right.
But that we don't focus on that. We focus again on our mission,
Hmm.
and we're a mission driven company. And for me personally, as an attorney, I've been focused on helping people with their legal matters since 2010, when I graduated law school. And I really, probably before that, I actually served a little bit of time as a legal assistant. And to become a lawyer, it's quite a process. It's quite a
Right.
process. I would say it's 3 years of law school, plus another year preparing for the LSAT. I don't know if they have it anymore. I know that they're taking out these standardized. It's been so long,
Yep.
but but I do know they still have the bar exam. So, and
Yep.
that is at least a 6-month process if you pass the first time, which I did.
Mhm.
Or it can be a year process for individuals who don't pass who aren't lucky enough to pass the first time. So, just to become an attorney is a 4-year process, 6-figure in investment for law school or whatnot, and then the work itself. And so my point in all of this is, I had this mentality of wanting to help people as my mission and my purpose driven life, through a legal mechanism way before I even started Keeleg.
Mhm.
And as a practicing attorney, though, we're limited on one-to-one. And so, kind of going back to AI and artificial intelligence, the beautiful thing about that is that for real experts in their craft, they're able to impart some of this knowledge into a computer, and that knowledge can be shared with 1,000 people at the same time,
Right.
versus one-to-one, which is the current standard, where an attorney helps a client, they can only think about one case at one time. And so their brain space is occupied by one case, but
Mhm.
maybe their brain space has such a vast amount of knowledge that 1,000 people need that knowledge at the same time, but that attorney is physically incapable
He's
of it.
yeah. He's at max capacity. You
Yeah.
can't serve that many people. You have to have some junior attorneys. I would imagine some junior attorneys to kind of take the load off. And so that's one of the things that's attracted me to technology is it's infinitely scalable. The leverage, the compound interest that it has. Once you build the app, you can kind of scale it. I mean, these are basically robots that are in data centers that can answer all the questions that people have on their immigration issues. Talk to the audience about how artificial intelligence can be good and why people believe that artificial intelligence is going to be bad or should be regulated so it does not become bad.
So I come from the camp that AI is good.
Okay.
It advances human evolution. It
Mm-hmm.
advances human cause. It advances knowledge share. But just like all things, including privacy, can be abused, right?
Yep.
But that being said, I think that when technology can play a role in helping people so that they can focus in on other parts of their life that they want to enjoy, it, technology can help individuals streamline some of the minutiae in life, or some of these things that are too expensive, or
Mm-hmm.
some of these things that are too mundane and repetitive, so they can then focus on their art, or writing a book, or enjoying time with the family and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that as artificial intelligence advances, is actually, yes, I hear the counter argument that it's going to eliminate jobs. And I think that the people who get displaced need more job retraining, get them into a different line of work.
That's a whole, we can have another whole podcast episode on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I think and I think that AI doesn't per se discriminate against blue collar versus white collar. It's just across the board. But I think that as human beings, and as a global community,
Mm-hmm.
if we can let machines take care of certain tasks, because who are the ultimate beneficiaries of the machine's work? It's
The
human
people,
beings,
the human
right?
beings, absolutely. Yep.
Exactly. And I think that ultimately, as long as it's not abused, and as long as the systems are set up that people still aren't displaced, and the government or whatnot, fills that gap for people who are displaced, then humans as a species, we win.
Yeah.
We win, because then we don't need to focus on a skilled person. And I look at it like, maybe somebody who has the skill to be a doctor, but they've chosen to do something that
Investment banking, venture
Compute.
capital.
Look at that. I think iBankers and VCs are great, as long as they invest in our company. I'm just
Oh, spoken like a true attorney.
But things like that, maybe instead of doing those type of jobs, they can do other type of jobs that maybe benefit humankind as a whole,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because if you're going to be productive members of society, we're all going to be out there doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the opportunity gap is that's a different.
But to that point, it's all tied together.
Yes.
For the same. At one point in time, there's a quote from Henry Ford where he talks about, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. And that's true. This technology, and everything is technology at some point in time, during its infancy. It may not be the Model T, but it may be artificial intelligence. Thousands of years ago, it was, honestly, like a spoon. I mean, we're talking a long time ago. But as things get easier, that's all technology. And the internet hasn't reached massive scale yet. I just read something today, and I'm working on a blog post that kind of talks about this as well too. But I read that the internet's total GDP, and this is on Stripe's website, the internet's total GDP is only $3 trillion, whereas the total GDP for the whole entire globe is in the hundreds of trillions of dollars. We still haven't reached massive success on an internet level. So the gap is massive. And that's why, from 2010 to 2020, the best performing companies in the world are all essentially tech companies. Everybody, 2013 was banging on Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, diversify. And, Tesla's going out of business and all this, frankly, nonsense. Like if you evaluate these companies the same way as you evaluate a brick and mortar type business, you're doing it wrong, because these guys are playing a long game to where they're building the groundwork. Right. And every company, I think, now has to be an e-commerce company, has to be a technology enabled company. I mean, and there's a debate that's going on that, maybe we have too much technology right now, and you can do brick and mortar if you do it a certain way. But I mean, I'd be hard pressed to kind of take out an Amazon. Like, I don't know if a company is going to beat up that behemoth, and that's a whole nother conversation, where how big do these companies need to get before they're broken up? Because the three largest websites in the world are Facebook, Google, YouTube. And I mean, those are two companies right there.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack on there. Yeah, there's so much to talk about there. I think, kind of bringing it back to legal tech. So one thing that you mentioned, internet is 3 trillion, right?
Mm-hmm.
That brings to mind that the legal industry globally, the United States, it's around $500 billion, the legal industry.
Okay.
And globally, I think it's $1 trillion. The legal industry.
Really?
Legal industry. Yeah. So it's humongous market.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's all sorts of inefficiencies. And I'll give you one example, an inefficiency in how people decide and find attorneys. There's an inefficiency there. Yeah, word of mouth works, but statistically, I read an article, 1 out of every 3 purchasers of legal services locates their attorney on the internet. So if you extrapolate that number, $500 billion, so 1/3 of that, so there's about $150 to $200 billion of legal services that are originated off of a connection made on the internet. And I think that,
and to just not to cut you off, but is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm assuming that that's probably a bad thing.
I don't think it's a good or a bad thing. I think that
you and these lawyer responses.
Well, I try to be objective, and so I try to see both sides, right?
Yep.
And on one hand, it's a bad thing because there's an inefficiency there, and I think that there are situations where people end up hiring attorneys that they're unsatisfied with the work that they receive for the amount of compensation they provide. And so I think there's even an inefficiency there, where, because I bring it back down to, the individual who's hiring the attorney, and if they're going to hire an attorney so I'll give an example. An N400, Cato provides help with individuals who want to apply for naturalization. So their legal permanent residences, they're legal permanent residents here in the United States and want to apply for naturalization to become full-fledged U.S. citizens.
Okay.
Immigration attorney would charge them $2,000 to $3,000 for that application.
Why is immigration so complicated? I got a friend that, he probably moved from the Dominican Republic when he was maybe 7, and probably didn't become a citizen. He must have been 26, 27, something like that. And I'm sure you hear stories like that all the time. Why is it so complicated?
I think it's by design. Okay. We're a government of rules and regulations, and we need that. We need that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Society to function.
Yep.
But I think that when we identify what the rule is through a medium such as language, which is subject to interpretation oftentimes, key term or a comma or a misspelling or whatever can really throw off the whole meaning of whatever that rule is. So, and these rules are being crafted by large swaths of people at the legislative level, where there's many competing forces. So, just imagine there's for federal regulations, we have 100 senators and 500 Congress people, right? So imagine there's already 600 people who have their own biases, have their own interpretation of language.
Yep.
They'll have their own X, Y, and Z ways of developing law. And then they probably have 2 or 3 staffers each, at least. So right there, you have 2,000 different minds that go into crafting legislation.
Yep.
And so we start at that level. So they break out a rule or regulation, and then that rule or regulation has to be interpreted.
Mm-hmm.
And there we have the judicial system that interprets that regulation. And then you have thousands of attorneys that also contribute their thoughts. What does this mean? You know, this is how it should be interpreted. This is how this rule applies to this fact situation. And so to answer your question, why is immigration so complicated? Because there are a lot of competing interests on both sides, and we're using language as the medium to interpret what actions can and can't be done. And in the process, all of that communication gets convoluted.
Yeah, I can see. I think my biggest question right now is that, if Cato is the AI component of Keeleg, how is, or said another way, how does Keeleg remove that unconscious bias from the software or the?
Sure. I think that we try to, when we design Cato, we try to stick to the basics. Is it black? Is it white? And instead of getting too far in the weeds on interpretation, and because when you get into interpretation, then I think
that's the gray area.
Yeah, and gives rise to, that's when you kind of want an attorney to be involved.
Yeah.
Right. But I'll give an example. For Cato, one of the questions is, are you a legal permanent resident or not? And that's a very black and white answer, yes or no. Yeah. And so if they are a legal permanent resident, then they can apply for naturalization. If they're not a legal permanent resident, then they can't apply for naturalization, at least not with 400 form. And so that's how we've developed the app and the system. And I know that it's at a more of a rudimentary level, but AI, again, this is the beginning of the revolution. And so,
absolutely.
Think of AI in terms of, this is dial-up modem level.
Right. That, along with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and a lot of different new technology, feels like early stages of the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. I would even say that, like, some of the technology out there is just really, really mind-blowing. I know Elon Musk, for example, was working on the thing called Neuralink. That
he puts chips inside of human brains to kind of detect diseases and stuff. But yeah, man, like, they got, some people are just too smart for their own good.
Well, the chips and the placements on the brain for diseases, but then also for human thought. And so, I can imagine a day where we have these things installed not installed, but attached to our brains, and the images that we dream of can appear on a screen, right? And I can imagine a day where, we take the minds of some of our great legal thinkers, right? Some of the thought leaders in the legal industry, and we compile all of their brain knowledge together, and we mush them together in Cato. And then, 50 years from now, somebody asks a legal question to Cato, and you're getting a response that would have come from, Clarence Thomas, for example.
Oh my goodness, man. That's, and I think that's why we have to have, some placeholders in hand, and we have to get on that early, because, as that technology starts to advance, it'll be kind of too hard to, put the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. And what we're focused on is legal as our use case area, and then even within that, we're focused on a handful of legal specialty areas. But the use cases are so massive. They're really, really massive, and it's going to be remarkable. And the thing about AI is it's not one size fits all. There's different applications for AI and different methodologies for AI. So, for example, I know that they have trucks out there that are self-driving, that are doing interstate travel. Driving from Florida to California without a driver, and being able to ship tons of items in a truck bed. And that's really incredible.
Yeah. It's, I think the disconnect, and we were talking about this earlier, with having to re-educate the industry as some of these jobs essentially get eliminated, it's going to happen one way or another. If you're a barista, they have, I don't know if you fly out of SFO a lot. I'm gonna just say this in full disclosure. I'm an investor in a company called Cafe X, where if flying United, you can go into, I guess that's Terminal 3 in San Francisco, where a robot will essentially make your coffee. You go, click a few buttons, the robot makes your coffee. There's nobody inside of that booth. That type of technology is going to continue to happen, whether I like it or not. So not to say anything negative about the baristas at Starbucks, but if that's your occupation, you probably are going to have to move somewhere else. Just like, I come from the financial services industry. If you're a financial advisor, there used to be a time where you would call Tony and say, "Hey, Tony, buy me 1,000 shares of AT&T," and he got a big fat commission. If you try to do that now, that's not something that you have to make a phone call for anymore. That technology is going to make things easier for people to not only keep more money, so those people that are on those sides, have to do something else. The same thing is going to happen in the doctor's field, OBGYNs, et cetera. And I just think that, ultimately at massive scale, and I don't even know if we'll see it I'm 32. I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetime, but whenever we hit that point, we can spend more time working out, doing stuff with loved ones, instead of just actually being at work, toiling away,
Right. And so kind of what you were talking about, that barista. So what comes to mind is, okay, so the robot is serving coffee, whereas, before a barista would have done it. And maybe that person who would have been that particular barista is now off composing his or her music and is the next Mozart.
Spending a lot more time being creative, writing nonfiction books, fiction books, like doing some other things instead of that job, because we have a robot to kind of do it.
Yeah. Let the robot do the work if it can.
Yeah, the heavy lifting.
So long as it does it right. That's the thing. That's
absolutely.
And but that being said, I also think that that tech isn't going to eliminate everything entirely.
Oh, no. We'll just have to move to other. I mean, maybe instead of serving coffee, you fix the robots that serve the coffee, or something along those lines.
Right, or maybe the human being is involved in developing the different recipes that get injected. So, but going back to legal tech, I think that our technology isn't necessarily developed to replace attorneys. Frankly, I think it's to help attorneys and consumers find out whether or not they can do it themselves or whether they do need an attorney. And then we're also developing other backends that will help attorneys provide their solutions to their clients in a more expedient and efficient manner. And the hope is that time saving for that attorney can translate into a dollar cost saving for the consumer. So, for example, if the attorney normally would have charged $2,000 for something, but it would take him or her 2 or 3 hours of work to accomplish that goal. But with technology being able to splice that time requirement down to, say, 30 minutes, maybe that attorney wouldn't charge that client $2,000 or $3,000 anymore. Maybe they'd be willing to charge that person $500 or $1,000, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit about your team? Because I know that, for something like this, you probably have to have a technical co-founder. I don't know if you have a technological background or if you had to kind of, toil and do some reading and learning some new skills to kind of get this off the ground. But what's the makeup of the team?
Yeah, so I'm an attorney by trade. I don't have an engineering, computer science or computer engineering degree. Okay. I've played around with like HTML before and SQL before, but not at a level where I was able to program anything. We do have a CTO on our team, a great CTO. He graduated from one of the top computer science universities in the world, IIT in India. I'm not too familiar with IIT, but I hear it's like the MIT of India. So it's really top notch. A lot of the successful Silicon Valley CTOs have graduated from that institution. And so we have our CTO, we have 2 other engineers who work with him, and they're all US based. So I'm talking about my US based team because we also have an offshore team.
Okay, where's the offshore team located?
They're based in India as well.
In India? Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. And we also have 2 other attorneys that work with me on this project as subject matter experts. So I'm not the only attorney on here, and frankly, I don't practice immigration law. So that's not really my area of expertise. We really relied on our in-house experts for developing out those solutions for users on the immigration law front. And then we also have my co-founder who is a Silicon Valley veteran. And you and I were talking about this offline. He's gone through a number of exits. He's currently at another company right now, walking them through a buyout. He was with BitTorrent in 2000 and when did they got sold in 2018, I think, for $140 million. And so he was on their executive team, basically walking them through that exit. And so he's doing that again with another company and advising and investing in Keeleg.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like the team is strong, and a lot of success is on the horizon. Is there anything else that you want to kind of tell the audience? I don't want to keep you updated, but I mean, we could talk, you and I, for hours, and we'd love to have you back on the podcast, as you kind of, bring more services to market and, are kind of up and running as well too, kind of just get some updates. But I mean, we've talked about a number of things, from AI to legal to immigration. I mean, just a number of things. So we thank you for your time.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure. And, I think that ultimately, my message to your audience is to be open to new ideas and to be open to things that are not yet tangible. I think that AI is really hard for people to grasp, partly because it's kind of ephemeral, where it's kind of in cyberspace, it's in the cloud. And then on top of that, the labeling of the technology is also not always clear. So when I say like natural language processing, it's a key term, but what does that mean? Well, essentially it's the computer being able to have a conversation with you and recognizing text and speech, and being able to recite back in terms that you can also understand. So basically having a conversation with a computer where it doesn't even feel like you're having a conversation with a computer.
What books would you recommend the audience read in order to get a little bit more familiar with AI?
So I wouldn't, when I was doing my research on AI, I didn't pick up a particular book.
Okay.
What I did was, I Google search some of these key terms.
Okay.
And watched seminars and took some classes online about AI. And I really delved into this world that way, and kind of seeing what other industry players are doing out there with this technology, and just kind of keeping my ear to the ground. I'm sorry, I don't have a particular book in mind, but
that's fine.
That's what I would recommend be done. And it can be done, quickly. I mean, there's loads of information out there. Even, TED Talks. I've watched a bunch of TED Talks on this subject. And there's lots of videos on YouTube about the subject. And, there's lots of information out there.
Yeah, no, you have to, I think you just have to, be a nerd. And if you're interested in AI, like, there's a rabbit hole. There's a rabbit hole for anything on YouTube, for you to kind of go down, but especially with something like this.
But I will say I did pick up a few books. I just can't remember them at this off the top of my head. But there are definitely some great books out there regarding AI and startups, just kind of, I think for anybody involved in AI or startup or the tech world, to just absorb the information wherever you can get it, and whether it's a book or article, just try to get through as much of the material as possible and derive an expertise about it as quickly as you can. Yep. And then things will start clicking and making sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can the audience find you? Are you on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or any
So
places?
Sure. I do have Twitter, but I'm not active on it. You can find me on Instagram,
Okay.
ARL_today, ARL_today. I'd love for you to follow me and, give me a shout out, hit me up.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening to Outsized Returns. We'll catch you next week. Take care.